This is Robert Demers for Conman here at the New York Comic Con, and I'm here with writer Jim Zub, who you might know from the Skull Kickers and the upcoming Samurai Jack comic. There you go right there. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Pretty good. The convention's been treating you well?
It's great. It's incredibly busy. It's only Friday, but it feels like it's been a full weekend already. It's been great. People have been very, very kind, and sales are strong, so I'm thrilled.
What was it about writing comics that made you decide that you wanted to do that?
Obviously, like a lot of people, I grew up a big comic book fan, but also just a storyteller in general. So I grew up kind of involved in all sorts of creative pursuits. I love tabletop role-playing games, video games, but also comic books. And comics as a medium it's a really powerful way to tell a story. The mixture of the pictures and words working together directly in that way, it really grabs me. And it's something where even when I moved out of reading superhero comics, I was always reading some sort of comics, or I was reading Vertigo books, or I was reading manga. It's just been a part of my life since I was a kid, and so the idea of taking some of my storytelling ideas or sort of branching out into that as a storytelling medium seemed very natural for me.
Were there any writers that inspired your own writing?
Growing up, you wouldn't think of it based on Skull Kickers, but I loved Neil Gaiman stuff when I was a kid. Sandman as a teenager was a really powerful series for me. Did a lot in terms of just making me realize how that you could get deep with the story, you could get emotional with the story. So that had quite an influence on me. I really love Mike Mignola's stuff on Hellboy. I think it's a fantastic series. I've always really enjoyed it. Other writers, like a lot of people, I grew up on, X-Men, Spider-Man, but it was a lot of that was more about the art than it was necessarily the stories per se. But yeah, a lot of the superhero stuff I liked, but writing-wise, I think the Vertigo books have always jumped out at me, and manga series in particular. So,
what is your process when you begin to write a book?
I keep really sort of a very loose approach, trying to figure out what the main story beats are, or what the key visual scenes will be of a story. And then I sort of build outwards from there. So you come up with a series of important moments or plot points that are going to drive the story forward, and then you build the structure around it. So how we get to those particular scenes, what is the different elements that we need, or I don't want to say the evidence, but it's like you need to build up to a particular moment. So how do we create the structure that's going to logically lead us to that payoff that we want to have? Or what are the important building elements in terms of character that are going to carry us to those destinations? And so I start with sort of big goals about what I want to tell about the story, or whether it's a big action scene or a big emotional scene, and then I sort of build outwards from there, trying to figure out the structure based on the format. So if it's a 22-page comic, what are the story beats I need to lead up to that cliffhanger? Or what are if it's an action comic, how much action material can I put into it to really drive the momentum of the story forward, And so for me, it sort of starts from understanding those big moments and then filling in the gaps between them.
As I mentioned before, you'll be writing the upcoming Samurai Jack comic from IDW. What direction will you be taking the book?
Samurai Jack is obviously, an award-winning cartoon series, ran for 4 seasons. So we're treating the comic like it's a continuation. So it's season 5, we're picking up the torch and going from there. So all the episodes that happened previously have happened. We'll reference some of them, but you don't need to have watched every episode to understand where we are now in the story and where we're heading with it. So, it's still the same goals. Jack is trying to get back to the past. Jack is trying to defeat Aku, the shape-shifting demon wizard, and him trying to survive and quest through this unknown land of the future that he doesn't fully understand or comprehend, and the new challenges that he has to overcome. So the first storyline we've got is called The Threads of Time. So we sort of expanded a bit on that mythology. So there's this item, this artifact called the Rope of Eons. It contains the magic of time travel, and that's where Aku actually gained the ability to cast time travel spells that sent Jack into the future. And so when the Rope of Eons was, Aku didn't want anyone else to learn time travel magic, So he shredded the rope of eons into these individual threads, and they were spread all over the world. And Jack discovers the lore about this item and then starts to quest to gather the threads of time together. If he can rewind the rope, he can rewind his place in time and finally defeat a coup. So it's a pretty big, epic story with big challenges and a big payoff.
Samurai Jack is a very much loved character by many. What have you been doing to keep the essence of the character?
Well, I think it's really important when you're working on licensed material to do research. So I'm not trying to repeat what's been done before. I mean, the material's there and you want to make sure that you're adding something to it rather than just doing a feedback loop of the same jokes and the same things people have seen before. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't understand it. So I watched a few of my favorite episodes when I pitched to get the series, and then when I actually got the job, I rewatched the entire series, 3 or 4 episodes a day, and I would take notes about what sorts of themes or what sorts of elements they would have in the series, or even how far they could push the humor or the drama, just so I got a sense of the limitations or the structure that had previously been set by the series. I took down key parts of dialogue, wrote them down, so I would get a sense of the cadence of the characters, how they speak, how they think, what sorts of things are appropriate for Samurai Jack, and then trying to build on that strong foundation. So again, not trying to repeat myself. I'm not here to tell the same stories, but to know what has been established and to build from that framework.
How has it been working with Andy Siriano, who did work on the original animated series?
It's been an absolute thrill. So Andy was a designer on the series, and so having him drawing and designing the comic lends that real essence of what Jack is visually, and it gives us a confidence to sort of step forward and go, this is real, this is Samurai Jack 5th season, this is how it's going to work, these stories matter. And Andy's been enthusiastic, he's been a phenomenal partner to work with collaboratively, visually, in terms of the storytelling, and just when I send him the script and he tells me that it's working, it just gives it that extra understandable authenticity, that he knows the property so well and that he cares about it as much as I do and Cartoon Network and IDW do. So it's awesome. It's the best.
Currently, the Samurai Jack comic is slated to be a 5-issue series. Do you have other stories in mind if it does get picked up for additional issues?
I have really good news on that front. So the sales numbers on issue 1 came in, and they're strong enough that we're being extended to at least 10 issues.
That's fantastic.
It's awesome. Yeah, even before the first issue's out. So, and if the issue sales level out where they're hoping they will, then I'm hopeful we'll get an ongoing. So fingers crossed, but we're going to do 10. So the Threads of Time is now not just the story, it's the first story, and then we've got more planned. So yeah, I got more planned. We got a lot more planned. So we're going to do shorter stories, 2 issues, 1 issue, more like the structure of the show where you would have very much self-contained storylines. So more of that kind of format. What I'm hoping is if we get to do an ongoing, we'll do 2-issue and 1-issue stories for a while, and then every so often break out with another 4 or 5 part epic, something major, a big chapter forward in terms of the story, big things changing for Jack in his quest. So that would be the ideal for me, and I would write it as long as they'll let me, because I just love the property so much.
Obviously, you love the character.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, I believe that sooner or later a film will be made. How do you think that will react with the comic?
Well, we're working directly with Cartoon Network, and so no matter what happens, if a film happens, that will append onto the end of our comic. So the comic fits in between the show and whatever movie may come about down the road. That's our plan. That's always been our plan with it. So it's all it all works, it's all canon, and it all fits in the broad storyline. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us, and enjoy the rest of the con, and I'll be buying the first issue when it comes out.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate the support. If your viewers want to see more of my work, or I've got a lot of tutorials about the business, how to write comics, how to break into the business, then go to my website, jimzub.com, JIMZUB.com.
I say Zed too, so I'm Canadian too.
Oh, excellent. Well, for Canadians, it's Zed. Absolutely. Awesome.
Thank you again.
Thank you.